Hey guys, so welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a drugstore versus high-end makeup look. So one half of my face is all drugstore and then the other half is high-end. So take your guess down below. Let me know which side you think is drugstore and which one is high-end. I found some really good drugstore alternatives to high-end makeup products. Some of these are dupes, but these are all more so alternatives. I didn't want to call all of these dupes because they're not exactly the same, so I did my best. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please like and subscribe, and let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go ahead and start off with the base first. I'm not going to use an actual primer, but I am going to use a luminizer underneath my foundation. So for drugstore, I'm going to use the e.l.f. Halo Glow Liquid Filter in the shade Too Fair/Light. And for high-end, I'm going to use the Auric Glow Lust in the shade Selenite. And even though these are not exact dupes, they have a very similar glowy finish. So I like using these underneath foundation and they peek through really nicely. So it's kind of like a glowy primer. So I'm going to apply the e.l.f. one on the left half of my face and only applying that to the high points. Normally I would apply it down the bridge of my nose and on my cupid's bow, but I want to keep it to just one half for today, so I'm just going to skip that. And blending this out with this mini e.l.f. sponge. And then applying the Auric one on the right side. And this texture is a little bit thicker, but they really do look so similar once you blend them out. And I really can't tell a difference on my skin. And then blending that out with this mini Wet n Wild sponge. And this shade Selenite does look a little bit lighter than the e.l.f. one, which is kind of surprising because the e.l.f. one is in the shade Too Fair/Light. So I think the e.l.f. one runs a little bit deep, but look how similar these two products look. These two skin tints that I'm going to be using are not dupes, but I feel like they are very similar in some ways. They both have a natural matte finish with a bit of a glow, and they do give a good amount of coverage. So for drugstore, I'm going to use the Maybelline Superstay 24-Hour Skin Tint, and this one has vitamin C in it. I love this skin tint. It's more so like a foundation because it does have a lot of coverage. And then this one from BeautyBlender, this is the Bounce Skin Tint. This one might have a little bit less coverage, but I would say the finish is very similar to the Maybelline one. So let's go ahead and apply the Maybelline Skin Tint first. And for Maybelline, I do have to mix two shades. So I have the shades 118 and 220. So I'm gonna press that in with my brush. Every time I use this one, I just love how smooth it makes my skin look. And the amount of coverage that I get is just perfect. But this one just always blends so easily onto my skin. Like even if I'm having some issues, it always looks really good, which is very rare when it comes to foundations and skin tints for me. But this is such a beautiful finish. Okay, I cleaned up the brush now. And let's go ahead and apply the BeautyBlender Bounce Skin Tint. And this one I have in the shade Light 5, which is a light medium warm neutral shade. I love the dropper of this skin tint, by the way. It's a lot better than the Maybelline one, so definitely much more of a high-end feel, and it doesn't get as messy. These look so similar on my skin. I would say the finish is almost identical. Maybe the BeautyBlender one does look a little bit more hydrated, but honestly, I can't really tell much of a difference. Both very skin-like, both give a lot of coverage. So I'm gonna tap that out with my sponge. I'm gonna try to only use one side of the BeautyBlender for this side, but I just wanna press it in a bit more. And then using the other clean side for the Maybelline one. For the drugstore side, I'm going to be using the Maybelline Instant Age Rewind Eraser Concealer. And I have this one in the shade Light. I love how smoothing this one is on my under eyes. It's one of my favorite concealers now, and I just love it even more over the years. So I'm going to blend that out with this BK Beauty A506 brush. And then tapping it out with that mini e.l.f. sponge. And then for high end, I'm going to use the Haus Trichlone Skin Tech Concealer, which is also another favorite concealer of mine. And I know this one is a little bit thicker and maybe more hydrating on the skin. They have a very similar finish, and it's not something that I expected from these two concealers. I thought they were going to be very, very different, but they are similar enough in my opinion. So applying that on the right side. I think the Haus one does have a tiny bit more coverage, but they're almost the same. So I'm going to clean off that brush. And actually, now that I'm comparing both of these concealers side by side, I think the Maybelline one looks a little bit more skin-like. It's probably because the texture is thinner, so it does sit a little bit lighter on the skin. And tapping that out with my mini Wet n Wild sponge. I know so far I've only really talked about alternatives and not necessarily dupes, but I think these two bronzers are pretty much dupes. So for Drugstore, I'm going to use the Milani Cheek Kiss Cream Bronzer in the shade Hey Honey. And for high end, I'm going to use the Patrick Ta Cream Contour and Powder Bronzer Duo in the shade She's Sculpted. They both have more of an emollient texture, so they do feel very balmy. So actually, let me compare these. Okay, so here is the Milani one, and this one is in the shade Hey Honey. Okay, these are so similar. I hadn't compared these shades. So right next to it is the Patrick Ta one. The Patrick Ta one does feel slightly balmier than the Milani one, but they do look almost identical in terms of their finish. So let's go ahead and apply the Milani one first. And I'm going to apply that with this e.l.f. Complexion Duo brush. I just love how easily this one blends out, and probably a little bit easier than the Patrick Ta one. And I'm just going to pat over it with my sponge. I think this Milani Cream Bronzer is the best one that you can get at the drugstore. It does perform like a high-end product, and even though the packaging isn't very high-end, I don't even mind because the actual cream bronzer is so amazing. Next up, let's apply the Patrick Ta Cream Bronzer. And then tapping that out with my Wet n Wild sponge. I can't get over how similar these two products look. And actually the Milani one does look a little bit more seamless, I would say. The Patrick Ta one does have a slightly dewier finish, so it doesn't dry down quite as much as the Milani one, so I think that's why the Milani one looks smoother. I'm gonna go ahead and set my face with some powder now. So I'm gonna start with a translucent powder for my under eyes. And for Drugstore, I'm gonna use the Kimchi Chic Puff Puff Pass Set and Bake Powder in the shade Translucent. Kimchi Chic is technically Drugstore now because this one is available at CVS, at least the last time that I checked. So I'm gonna consider it Drugstore. And then for high end, I'm gonna use the Huda Beauty Easy Bake Setting Powder in the shade Pound Cake. These to me are very similar because they're both matte, they're both very smoothing, and they make my makeup last all day long. Let's go ahead and apply the Kimchi Chic one first. So setting my under eye with that and the T-zone. I am gonna apply a pressed setting powder for the rest of the skin, so I'm really just focusing on the center. Luckily, I do have two of these e.l.f. small tapered brushes, so I'm gonna take this other clean one and apply the Huda Beauty one. I almost feel like the Kimchi Chic one is a little bit brighter. So even though it is technically translucent, I do see a little more brightness on this side compared to the Huda Beauty one. But I love how both of these set my concealer. And then to set the rest of my face, I'm gonna take a pressed powder. So for Drugstore, I'm going to use the L'Oreal Infallible Fresh Wear Foundation in a powder. And this one is in the shade 190 Beige Sand. And I think this one is pretty similar to the Charlotte Tilbury Flawless Finish Powder. So I'm going to use that one for the high-end side. And this one is in the shade 2 Medium. Even though these are not dupes, I do like how smoothing both of these are. And I like that they give some coverage. So I'm going to use this Real Techniques contour brush. And this one is technically a powder foundation, so it does give some coverage. And for that reason, I don't like to build it up too much because it can start looking a little heavy. And then taking another clean Real Techniques contour brush, I'm going to apply the Charlotte Tilbury one. And these shades look pretty much the same. I have a really good alternative to the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette, which is one of my favorite palettes in my collection, and I love how this one leans cool toned, but you also get some neutrals in here. But this one is a really good everyday palette. So the Lamora Nude Eyeshadow Palette is very, very similar, and I think this one is a great alternative. This one is $14.99, whereas the Natasha Denona one is $69. So quite a price difference. Even though you don't get quite as many shades, this one you do get 12 shades, whereas the Natasha Denona one you get 15. You can get very, very similar looks, and the mattes are not quite as pigmented and maybe not as blendable, but they are workable, and I do enjoy the looks that I get from this palette. The shimmers in here are actually really good, and I think they're better than the matte ones. So I think this one is a great alternative to the Natasha Denona one. But I'm going to prime my lids with the Milani Eyeshadow Primer. And I'm going to use this one for both sides because I want to keep it fair. So applying that to my lids with my finger. And actually I'm going to take a little bit of what's left on my powder brush and set from the brow bone down to the crease. But let's start off with the shade Toasty from the Lamora palette. I love how cool toned this shade is, and I think it's the most cool toned light matte shade in the palette. But I'm just going to slowly build up that shade. I'm also going to take the shade Stone from the Natasha Denona palette. I think this shade is the most similar to Toasty. So right away I'm noticing that this shade is more pigmented than the one from the Lamora palette. So I might have to go back and build up this shade. Okay, I think they look similar enough at this point. So I'm gonna deepen up the outer corner with a shade that isn't as cool toned as the other ones. So from the Lamora palette, I'm gonna take the shade Enigma. I just wanna balance out the cool tones in this look. So applying that on the outer corner. And then dragging some into the crease. From the I Need a Nude, I'm going to take the shade Vague. I'm going to take a clean fluffy blending brush and blend over the edges. I'm going to deepen up the outer corner with the shade Cocoa from the Lamora palette. So pressing that onto the very outer edge of the outer corner. And then from the I Need a Nude, I'm going to take the shade Tender. And this one looks more gray toned compared to Cocoa. Cocoa looks more like a neutral brown shade. But I guess they're similar enough. So pressing that onto the outer corner as well. And then for shimmer, I'm going to take the shade Halo from the Lamora palette. This is one of the best shades in the entire palette. I also really like Quartz, which is more of a pinky shade. All the shimmers in here do perform beautifully. I haven't found any duds in here, so the shimmers in this palette do perform more like high-end compared to the matte shades. So I'm going to apply the shade Halo with my finger. It almost has a glossy, wet finish. And you also get those really pretty fine shimmers in there. And then I'm going to take the shade Muse from the Natasha Denona palette. And this one I would say is the closest to that shade. It also has that very glossy wet finish. And then blending out the edges with this clean, fluffy blending brush. I'm also going to line my upper lash line. So for the Lamora side, I'm going to use this shade Eclipse. And then for the Natasha Denona side, I'm going to use Silhouette. For the lower lash line, I'm going to take the shade Toasty on the left side. And then Stone on the right side. I'm also going to take Enigma and press that onto the outer half. And for the right side, I'm going to take Vague. And then finally taking the shade Cocoa for the left side and pressing that really close to the outer lash line. And then for the right side, I'm taking the shade Tender and buffing that out. And then for an inner corner highlight, I'm going to use Quartz on the left side. And then Mia on the right side. These two pinky shades look almost identical. I went ahead and did my brows and mascara off camera. So for Drugstore, I used the e.l.f. Ultra Precise Brow Pencil in the shade Cool Brown. For high-end, I used the Anastasia Beverly Hills Brow Wiz in the shade Ebony. And I just used the e.l.f. Wow Brow Gel to set both of my brows in place. And then for mascara, I used the Clio Killash Superproof Mascara. And I just used that on both of my eyes because I don't have another high-end mascara that is similar to this one, but this one I guess is kind of in between Drugstore and high-end. It's somewhere in the middle, but let's go ahead and add some powder bronzer next. So I'm going to apply the e.l.f. Primer Infused Bronzer in the shade Forever Sunkissed on the left side. So I'm just going to apply that right over top of that cream bronzer. And this one is also a bit warmer. I love how silky smooth this one is. And then a very similar one that is high-end / luxury is the Pat McGrath Labs Skin Fetish Divine Bronzer in the shade Bronze Dawn. And this one is also very silky smooth, and it is a warmer bronzer shade. It also has a very similar finish to the e.l.f. one. So I'm going to apply that with this dual-ended Real Techniques brush. I know I didn't add a cream or liquid blush, but I'm going to apply a powder one. And these, I was so surprised at how similar the shades were. So this one from Essence is the Essence the blush in the shade Befitting. And this is a really pretty pinky shade. And then for high-end, I have this Too Faced Cloud Crush Blurring Blush. And this one is in the shade Velvet Crush. But look at how similar those shades are. They're both pink blushes, but they have a slight mauvey undertone to them. I haven't been the biggest fan of the Too Faced one, but I did start using it recently and I do like it a lot more than I used to. I don't know why that is. I used to think it was a little bit patchy for some reason, but I have tried it a few times recently and I don't think it's patchy. And then the one from Essence is very good as well. This one is a really silky smooth formula. I think the Essence one is a bit more pigmented though, but they both have that blurring finish to them. Okay, I cleaned off that brush and now I'm gonna apply the Too Faced one. This one doesn't have as much kick up in the pan, but they do perform pretty much the same. But I do really like how blurring this finish is. And actually, I think it is a bit more pigmented than the Essence one. I don't know why I thought it was the other way around. So I'm going to clean my brush again and apply a bit more of the Essence blush just so I can balance it out. For Drugstore highlighter, I have the Revlon Skin Lights Prismatic Highlighter in the shade Daybreak Glimmer. And this one is so close to the one from Hourglass, specifically from this Hourglass holiday palette. And this one is from a couple of years ago. This is the Celestial Strobe Powder in the shade Celestial Strobe Light. I think the undertones of these highlighters are pretty much the same. They look almost identical in the pan. So applying the Revlon one over here. And then the Hourglass one on the right side. These two lip liners are both very long wearing and the shades look almost identical. So this one is the Maybelline Lifter Liner in the shade On It. And then this one from Fenty Beauty is the Traced Out Pencil Lip Liner in the shade Rubber Bands. I do prefer the Maybelline one, however, because it is very long wearing, but it does dry down and you can still smudge it out. Whereas the Fenty Beauty one, once it dries down, it's so hard to smudge it. So once it dries down, it stays in place, which can be a good thing, but it's almost a bit much for me. But the shades are very similar. So here's the shade On It from Maybelline. And then right next to it is Fenty Beauty Rubber Bands. It might be a little bit warmer than the Maybelline one, but these were the most similar ones in my collection. So I figured even if they're not exact, they're gonna look very similar on the lips. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply the Maybelline one. And then Fenty on this side. I'm going to top that with a gloss. So for Drugstore, I have the L'Oreal Plump Ambition Hyaluron Lip Oil. And this is in the shade La Nuit Sparkle. This one has a bit of a plumping effect, but I love how hydrating this one is. And this shade is so pretty because it is a brown lip gloss with shimmer in it. And then for the high-end side, even though this one isn't a plumping gloss like the L'Oreal one, the shade is almost identical to it. So this one is the Fenty Gloss Bomb in the shade Hot Chocolate Fantasy. Very similar shade because it's also a brown lip gloss and it does have that really pretty shimmer to it. So I'm going to apply this one on this side. They both have that very high shine finish. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some setting spray next. For Drugstore, I have the e.l.f. Shield Me Setting Mist. And this one is from a collection from a few years ago, but they do have this one in their permanent collection. But this one to me is a really good alternative to the Urban Decay All Nighter Setting Spray. They both have alcohol, but they also have some hydrating ingredients like aloe vera. So these, even though they can be slightly mattifying, they also keep my skin hydrated. So I'm going to try to apply this one just to the left half. I really like how fine the mist is on the e.l.f. one, and it does have a slight fragrance, but it's not overpowering. The Urban Decay one I don't think has a fragrance to it, at least I've never noticed it. The mister on this one is a little bit stronger than the e.l.f. one, but they both do a really good job at setting my makeup and mattifying while also keeping everything hydrated and looking very fresh. Alright guys, so that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Here is the completed makeup look. I love how this one turned out. I really can't tell the difference between both of these sides. I feel like they look so similar, so I'm really happy with all the products that I chose for today's look. And let me know in the comments down below what some of your favorite drugstore alternatives to high-end products are. I'm always looking for drugstore alternatives or dupes, so make sure to let us know in the comments, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!